Narada, Preme Gada Gada, Bhakti Vino, Purana Sampada, Jaya Gaur Chande, Aradhika Sobha, Diva Jaya Jaya Gaur Chande, Aradhika Sobha. Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Krishna Hare
Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Rama Rama
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Krishna 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 Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Jai. 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 ISKCON Philadelphia. Jai. 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 Shri Shri Radha Krishna. Jai. 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 Jai.
Nothing is over. I share it with his pants.
You have to look here because I can't speak in this microphone.
Hare Krishna.
Hey Krishna. Sorry, my thing is still charging.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for joining us on Zoom and YouTube. We highly appreciate you taking out time for this special event tonight on Bhadra Purnima. We are all very excited here in the temple to start the event. And as you know, Bhadra Purnima is very auspicious in Srimad Bhagavatam. So without much ado, we will invite His Grace Vishnu Prada Prabhu, who will be talking about the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. And after his lecture, we will glorify those devotees who have participated in this Bhadra Purnima campaign. Hare Krishna.
Oh, it just started. I thought it was late for it. Yeah, bye.
Hare Krishna.
What the hell happened?
Okay. Let me know. This is okay. Yeah, that's fine. You know. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu
Sindhubhya eva cha
Dhanam
patitanaha
pavanebhyo
pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you for coming and attending this program. We are recognizing and observing and celebrating the Bhadra Purnima for the completion of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, Dinutarpita Prabhu asked me to speak a little bit about Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't know how long I'm supposed to, I should have asked. How long am I supposed to speak for? Oh, okay, 45 minutes, great. Okay, right. So I thought I would read a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then we'll talk. And if you have a question as I'm going or at any time, you could raise your hand there. I'll see it on this Zoom platform here. So I picked a verse from the second canto, 6th chapter, and 46th verse for viewing today on this topic. Why don't you come a little closer? This is in the middle. Yeah. And I'll just recite it once, not like a regular Srimad Bhagavatam class. Even though it's a pandemic, and I think you can even sit on that blue shirt and that one here. Okay. Pradhanyato yan rishi amananti Leelavataran purushasya bhumna apiyatam karna kashaya shoshan anukramishye tadiman supeshan. Oh, I forgot. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Okay, let's read again this verse. Pradhanyato yan rishi amananti Leelavataran purushaya bhumna apiyatam karnakashaya shoshan anukramishye iman supeshan. This is from the second canto. There's a chapter called, do you know any of the chapters from the second canto? This one is the chapter Purusha Shukta confirmed. And it's Lord Brahma is speaking to his disciple. You know whose disciple is the disciple of Brahma? Narad.
Yes.
Very good, very good. So he's saying, "Oh Narad, now I shall state one after another the transcendental incarnations of the Lord known as Leela avatars. Hearing of their activities counteracts all foul matters accumulated in the ear. These pastimes are pleasing to hear and are to be relished. Therefore, they are in my heart." So in your own words, what was that? what do you remember what the verse was about? Anybody? Or on the Zoom?
About the different incarnations.
About the different incarnations, yeah. So we're going to speak about them. And what's the anything particular about those?
It will counteract all the dirt in our ears.
Yeah, and be very
Pastimes are
yes.
pleasing to hear.
Very good, yeah. So we have this in the Vedic times, people would hear once and then they'd remember. They wouldn't have to. So we have a little difficulty with that sometimes. I do. So purport by Srila Prabhupada. As it was said in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 5th chapter, 8th verse, one cannot be satisfied by hearing unless and until one is given a chance to hear of the transcendental activities of the Lord. So, Brahmaji is also trying in this verse to stress the importance of narrating the transcendental pastimes of the Lord as he comes and manifests himself here on the surface of the material planets. Did that happen actually? Did it actually happen? Every living entity has a tendency to hear pleasing messages. And as such, every one of us is inclined to hear news and talks broadcast by radio stations. You listen to radio? People don't listen so much to radio anymore. They look at blogs and websites and things like that. But the same principle is going on. Yeah, isn't it? You go to blogs and websites and things. Sure, of course. They want to hear you, so you might hear or read. Yeah. But the difficulty is that no one is satisfied at heart by hearing all those messages. The cause of such dissatisfaction is, now this is interesting. The cause of such dissatisfaction is the incompatibility of the message with the innermost stratum of the living soul. Did you get that? Why isn't it satisfying? What's that? Yeah, it's incompatible. It's not, yeah, it doesn't sync. It's not in sync with who you are. Yeah. Living soul. This transcendental literature is especially prepared by Srila Vyasadeva to give the utmost satisfaction to people in general by narration of the activities of the Lord as instructed by Srila Narad Muni to Srila Vyasadeva. Such activities of the Lord are principally of two varieties. One concerns the mundane manifestation of the material creative force, and the other deals with his pastimes in the form of different incarnations in terms of time and place. So what were the two? Oh, you're going to say? Okay. That's all right. Yes, good. Yeah, you got it too. There are innumerable incarnations of the Lord, like the waves of a river flowing constantly in and out. Less intelligent persons take more interest in the creative forces of the Lord in the material world, and being disconnected from their relationship with the Lord, they put forward many theories of the creation in the name of scientific research. The devotees of the Lord, however, know well how the creative forces work concurrently by the reaction of the material energy of the Lord. Therefore, they take more interest in the transcendental activities of the Lord as he incarnates himself on the surface of the world. Srimad Bhagavatam is the history of such activities of the Lord, and people who take interest in hearing Srimad Bhagavatam clear their hearts from accumulated mundane filth. There are 1,001 rash literatures on the market. But one who has taken interest in Srimad Bhagavatam loses all interest in such filthy literatures. So Brahmaji is thus attempting to narrate the principal incarnations of the Lord so that they may be drunk or knotted as transcendental nectar. Om Agyana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtang Stapitang Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Katamayam Dadati Sha Pandantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So under the influence of Maya and of false propaganda, I think sometimes people call it fake news, and negative association, we forget our spiritual identity, which is eternal, full of joy, and superconscious. There was an experiment called the Stanford Prison Experiment. Have you ever heard of that? The Stanford Prison Experiment? He's heard of it. He's thinking. Yeah, so it happened in the 60s. A lot of weird, funny things happened in the 60s. But what happened was, it took place during the summer recess at Stanford University in the psychology department. It was a social psychology experiment. And what they did was they converted the basement of the psychology department into a mock prison. You remember this? Okay. And they got volunteers and they paid the people, at that time it was like $20 for a week of their time, which today would be $100 about, so that they to volunteer in their experiment. And so one by one, they had maybe 30 volunteer students, a little bit older than you, but a little bit older than you. And they came in and they drew straws. So some of them were going to be prisoners and some of them were going to become guards. They're the same student, same kind of students, but so half of them became students and half of them became guards. So the people, prisoners, half of them became prisoners, half of them became guards. So those students who became prisoners, they got locked in the rooms in the basement of the psychology department, and the guards would go and watch them, make sure they weren't doing anything outlandish and stuff like that. So an experiment. So they made some observations. They recorded the people in their rooms, the prisoners, and then the guards also. So there was a lot of interesting things that came out of this experiment. It had to be stopped after 2 days, 2.5 days, because the prisoners revolted, and the guards were going to try to beat them, even though they're students. They were just the same students. Anyway, but one thing they noticed, it was very interesting, is that while the students who were prisoners, their discussions and talk started to become all about what was going on inside the basement of the psychology department, or in other words, inside their prison. They stopped talking all about what was going on in their regular lives in the world, even though they were only there for 2 days. They were talking about how are they going to get back at this guard, how are they going to escape, how are they going to get better food, this kind of thing, after just 2 days. So this is very relevant. Can you think about how it might be relevant? Yeah, because we're in this material world, and we just discuss stuff that's going on in this material world. We forget about. They were only there for 2 days. We've been here for a lot longer in the material world, but we forget about our spiritual nature, and thus our thoughts and discussions become diverted to and preoccupied with mundane politicians, places, and activities that are not relevant to our spiritual nature. You follow? You follow? And in our hopelessness, this ignorance prevails lifetime after lifetime as we struggle for existence and some kind of lasting happiness that we never attain. This is going on. And you notice that, remember in the purport, it said something about it was incompatible with their, so this is the same kind of thing is happening. Lord Krishna, the first instruction of Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he dispelled Arjuna's confusion. What was his first instruction? Yeah, that he first emphasized that Arjuna recall as an Aryan. What is an Aryan? What's an Aryan? What's an Aryan? Huh? Yeah, civilized person, somebody who's not just an animal. Lord Krishna said, Yasyatma buddhi kunape tridhatuke svadhi kalatradishu bhoma ijadi yatirtha buddhe silele na karhichet janyeshu abigeshu saeva gokara. Gokara. A person who thinks that they're their bodies and other things, thinks that they're bodies, they are animals, like an ass. Krishna said, not me. I won't criticize it. Krishna says, and I have that same. So the civilized person, like that, just like you and I, we are, and you should know that we are eternal, undying, and that we take on a material body like a person might put on a garment. So I don't call you a Philadelphia t-shirt, right? Because that's just your shirt, right? Despite the ubiquitous, you know that word ubiquitous? You know the word ubiquitous? It means all pervading, it's everywhere. Despite ubiquitous spin in the modern world to the contrary, life, persons, and consciousness are not the product of a complex mixture of proteins and other physical ingredients that arise from a different dynamic spiritual dimension. That's you and I. That's you and I. This is the beginning of Lord Krishna's teachings. And he continues to elucidate on himself, karma, time, and the process of yoga, meaning how the jiva, the soul, you and I, can get free from the influence of karma and birth and death through devotional service, the topmost yoga. So in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna delineates precepts primarily and confidential knowledge that those precepts are for Arjuna to follow. He gives you information, detailed information about the soul, and as we said. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada described the Bhagavad Gita, you probably know, as the ABCs. ABCs. And if you don't know the ABCs, you can't go on to, if you don't graduate grade school, or you don't graduate high school, you can't go into college. So if you don't know the ABCs, you're not going to go further. Srimad Bhagavatam is the graduate study of the Bhagavad Gita, is particularly for those who have strong faith that they are not matter, that they are spiritual beings and they are part and parcel of God. So in that sense, Srila Prabhupada used to say very often, example is better than precept. Example is better than precept. Have you ever heard that? You know what that means? Precept, we were just talking about. In Bhagavad Gita, there's precept. You are not the body. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. That's a precept. An example means demonstration of the precept. How do you put it into practice? Oh, now that I know that I'm a soul, what am I going to do? How are things going to be different? Srimad Bhagavatam is the example of the precepts in the Bhagavad Gita. Do you follow? Do you follow? Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah. So over the last 40 years in American universities, there's been a new emphasis, I don't know, you probably know, on diversifying the teaching of history. How's that? For example, in the last 40 years we're talking, in many universities now they have a Department of African American History. That was never there back in our day, but now they have a Department of African American History. Sometimes they even have a Department of Middle Eastern History and stuff like that. But especially in the United States, they're more prevalent. African American history. Why is that? Why is that? Why do they have those departments now? Just because they feel like it. But because that one reason is because that curriculum was left out, right? It was not included, or was not thought to be important. And because those who considered themselves African American had a sense that their regular history, which was their background, was, or the history that was being taught, was not relevant to them. Do you follow? It's not relevant to them because they're African American. So this history that we're learning, it has nothing to do with me. So let's have this kind of history because it's relevant to me. So I'm making an example here. So in the same way, the history, all the history that we find is only related to the mundane material world, which has nothing to do with us, the soul. And that Department of History, you don't find anywhere in any university. You only find it in Srimad Bhagavatam. That is history that's relevant to you and me, our real identity, our real person, the real soul. Example is better than precept. Of course, they're both good, and one depends on the other. Okay, so therefore we know in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, the famous verse, 4th chapter, 9th verse. You know that verse? 4th chapter, 9th verse. Okay, I give you. Janma is the first word. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yoveti tatvata chaktva deham puna janma naiti mameti sarjuna. My birth, my janma, my karma, my activities are transcendental. Krishna says, he's talking about transcendental knowledge. He says that my birth and my activities are transcendental. And if you understand them, truly, if you truly understand them, chaktva deham, you give up this body, you won't get another body, you'll come to me. So he explains that precept in the Bhagavad Gita, and then it's demonstrated where? In the Srimad Bhagavatam. He doesn't talk about his activities in Bhagavad Gita very much, a little bit, but not very much. It's very fully explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a very practical example of precept and example. Okay. So for that reason, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to call the Srimad Bhagavatam two things. I don't know if you know these things. Two things he used to call Srimad Bhagavatam. No? Amalam Puranam. Amalam Puranam. There's 18 Puranas. And they discuss various things. But the Srimad Bhagavatam is Amalam Puranam because it hasn't mixed with it any other information other than the transcendental service of the activity of the soul, the transcendental service and developing love of God. Also, it's called, Srimad, I'm going to test you on this later, Paramahansa Samhita. Have you heard that before? Samhita. Samhita is Vedic literature. And Paramahansa means for those topmost spiritualists. This is the literature for them, Paramahansa Samhita. Okay. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, actually, if we study it, it becomes very interesting from that point of view. And there are really, at least in Srimad Bhagavatam, 3 interrelated stories about how the Srimad Bhagavatam came to being. Right? Did you know any of those? How the Srimad Bhagavatam, how it was spoken? One story, one history is, there are some sages at Naimisharanya, right? There's actually thousands of them. Can you imagine thousands of sages coming to Naimisharanya, a holy place where they were going to have this yajna? And they're going to hear the explanations of Srimad Bhagavatam from Sutta Goswami for years. That's going to go on. That's one example of the Srimad Bhagavatam being spoken. You know another example of the Srimad Bhagavatam being spoken? Yeah, very good. Maharaj Parikshit, a king, a powerful king of the whole earth. You know, he had riches, he had followers, he was an amazing person. He was a great devotee of the Lord, but by a small mistake, he was cursed, and he was informed that he was cursed by a young Brahmin boy to die in 7 days. Shringi, that's right, Shringi, yeah. So he went, he left, he gave up all of his possessions, and he went to the bank of the Jamuna and sat down there to hear Srimad Bhagavatam for 7 days without eating, without sleeping for 7 days from Shukadev Goswami. So that was another instance of the appearance or the recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam. But there's a third one that's also very, very interesting. Yes. Well, even before that, it's related to Srila Vyasadeva. But I read this, the first time I read this was in a Back to Godhead magazine. It was an excerpt from Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's the story, the history of Narad Muni in the Srimad Bhagavatam. You know? Yeah. Because if you remember, how did Srimad Bhagavatam come to be spoken? It's because Vyasadeva, who is a literary incarnation of God, was compiling and editing the Vedic literature. The Vedas were already existing, but they were spoken and they were dispersed. So he wanted to bring them together in one place and write them down, because he could see in this age, in this Kali Yuga age, people's memories are going to be short, and there's going to be so many distractions. And that was even before cell phones. And there are going to be so many distractions, and people are not going to be interested in spiritual life. So he compiled many Vedic literatures, like the 4 Vedas, Rik, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva Veda. He compiled those Vedas. He compiled the Upanishads. He wrote the Puranas, the Mahabharata, and then to kind of sum it all up and summarize it, he wrote something called Vedanta Sutra. So he was there in his ashram, which you can visit. You can visit Vyasadeva's ashram. It's up in the Himalayas. It's called Samyaprasa in the area of Badrinath, Badrikashram. But, you know, he was still, after writing all these things, he was feeling discouraged, unhappy in heart. And why was he feeling unhappy in heart? Huh? He said, maybe, just maybe it's because I haven't dedicated a work that exclusively glorifies the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mahabharata has Bhagavad Gita. In the Puranas and different other things, you'll find there's glorification of Krishna, but it's mixed with all other kinds of things. And so when people study it, they can get distracted or make a mistake and think, well, those other things are more important. So he was feeling, so he thought, maybe it's because that I'm not so sure. That was the thing he had in his heart, but he wasn't so sure about it. So then just as he was having that feeling, you know who showed up? Narad Muni showed up, that's right. He showed up, and Vyasadeva, who's a great exalted sage, he offered him respects and he gave him a seat. And because Narad Muni is his guru. Even great saintly persons have gurus. So he has his guru. And so the first thing Vyasadeva said to him when he had him sit down, you know what he said? Very similar to what Lord Krishna told to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. He said, my dear Prabhu, he said Prabhu, even though Vyasa is his disciple, he said Prabhu. He said, my dear Prabhu, you know, he said, do you accept the body, the material body and the mind as the purpose and the focus of self-realization? Say very, very similar, very similar. And then he told him, you've written all these wonderful things, but one thing you've neglected is you've neglected to dedicate a work to exclusively glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Hari, Krishna. So he had that inkling already, but it was confirmed by his guru. This is how spiritual life works. Sometimes we have gut feelings. You have gut feelings sometimes? So you check it. You could check it with a guru, or you check it with sadhu, and you check it with shastra. So Vyasadeva, he was the author of the shastras, so he had this feeling, and it was directly confirmed by his guru, Narad Muni. So then Narad Muni, he said, you know, you've done such wonderful work, but I have to tell you that literature that neglects to glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead is just like a garbage dump. That's pretty shocking, you know, pretty critical. Just like a place of pilgrimage for crows. You know, have you gone through, I think it's Route 280, or when you go to New York, just before you get to New York and you're somewhere in Jersey City, there's this really big kind of mound on your right side if you're going towards New York. And oftentimes you'll see all these crows there. You don't see swans there, you see crows. Well, what that is back in the early days when New Jersey wasn't so highly populated, all the garbage from New York City was trucked into New Jersey and dumped there and then covered with earth. So that earth, that big mound, big hilly part, when you're coming into New York City on the right side from the south, that's a big garbage dump. And all those crows are there because they like that garbage. They like that smell of garbage. So now when he says that place, that literature that doesn't glorify the Supreme Personality of God, it is like that. But people who are really interested in their spiritual development, they don't go there. They don't go there. And then, very interesting, because we're talking about example and precept. Example and precept. So in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, also there's some precept also. Shrinvatam svakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana. If you hear this, then nashta prayeshu badreshu. If you hear Srimad Bhagavatam, your heart becomes cleansed, even, you know, just almost completely cleansed just by regular hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam. Then Vyasadeva says, well, how did it happen that you became a great devotee, Narad Muni? So then Narad Muni explains his background. Usually, you know, you don't so much ask the guru about their previous life, but this was very, very instructive, because Narad Muni, this is very interesting. It's very interesting because, you know, we talked about, you know, before the sages of Naimisharanya, and I remember when I read that, I think, well, I'm not a sage. I'm not going to be able to go to Naimisharanya for 100 years or 1,000 years to listen to this stuff, right? Nor am I a king or, a ruler of the world or even a politician? So that's a whole different thing for me. But what was Narad Muni when he heard Srimad Bhagavatam? What was he? He was simply a little boy. And not even, a scholarly little boy, not even from an elevated family. He was just born of a common woman. Nothing special. Nothing special at all. So how did he become Narad Muni? Oh, this is very, very interesting. So his mother, some devotees, they're called Bhaktivedantas, because Vedanta means someone who understands the goal of Vedas, the conclusion of the Vedas by devotional service. So real Vedantas practice bhakti. So they had come there, and usually Bhaktivedantas, at that time particularly, during the rainy season, they wouldn't travel. They might travel, they travel at others, but during the rainy season, they didn't travel. So they decided to stay in that location. And their mother said, okay, you can stay here. And she would serve them. And who else served them? Narad Muni. Narad Muni. And he served them. And what else happened? Yeah, that was a little later. He heard them. He heard their discussions on Srimad Bhagavatam. On Srimad Bhagavatam. He heard that he was just a common little boy of 5. A common little boy. And he heard, so I'm reading this stuff and I'm thinking, wow, if this common little boy can do it, well, maybe there's hope for me, right? I'm not a king, I'm not a sage, but at least I'm not that different than an ordinary boy. So if he by hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and doing some service to the great souls, the Bhaktivedantas, because one gets access to spiritual life by hearing from a proper source, by hearing from a spiritual master, doing service. And then, as you mentioned, he took a little prasad, and then his heart became so much cleansed that he became very ready to accept Krishna's mercy. So that what happened was, what happened then? He was going to school one day. He went to school. They had a little school there. It's just a short time after the Bhaktivedantas left. He went to school one day and he came back. His mother went out to milk a cow and was bitten by a cobra or snake, some kind of snake, and she died. So here he was alone. He was an only child. So what did he do? Did he cry and kind of think, oh, woe is me? Because he had heard from the Bhaktivedantas, he thought, well, this must be the arrangement of God. We're all faced with difficult times, in our lives. All kinds of difficult times happen in our lives. And, a person who's got elevated a little bit like Narad Muni, who had heard, he took it as the mercy of the Lord. So he said, okay. So he left home and he traveled through all the different towns and villages, mines, forests where there are deep, dark, and dangerously, there's snakes and lions, but he had, because he understood the Supreme Lord is protecting him. Then when he got into a forest, he came to a big banyan tree. Have you seen a banyan tree before? They're gigantic and they have, because usually you think of banyan trees with Lord Buddha. So Narad Muni went to the banyan tree and said, oh, this is a good place to take rest. He bathed in the lake nearby, and then he sat under the banyan tree and began to concentrate on his super soul within the heart as he had heard from the Bhaktivedantas. And just then, Lord Krishna appeared in his heart. And he began to shed tears of joy. Srila Prabhupada comments that he had attained bhava. There are different stages in devotional service, different stages. It's very specific. Adao Shraddha. In the beginning, you need a little faith. Tata, sadhu sangha, association with devotees. Ta, bhajana kriya, you have to engage in regular service. Yeah. Then nishta, one becomes fixed. Then ruchi, taste. Then bhava. Bhava is the next stage, the preliminary stage to prema. So Krishna appeared within his heart and then disappeared. And Narada Muni became confused. He thought, well, I want to try to see that wonderful, beautiful person that's so much attractive, but he couldn't see it. He was perturbed. He couldn't see anymore. So even though he tried to do it the same way, do the same kind of meditation. So then Lord Krishna spoke to him. He said, I regret that in this life, you're not going to see me again. But you know what? He said, but that was just, I showed you just to increase your desire to achieve me. Because in that way, you'll achieve full perfection. So that actually stayed with him that whole life. So that at the end of that life, he remembered Krishna and he got a transcendental body to befitting the being associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then Lord Krishna gave him his Veena so that he travels everywhere. And he said, I travel everywhere within this universe by the mercy of the Lord, and the Lord appears within my heart as if called for, as soon as I begin chanting the transcendental glories of the Lord, like Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is the from a little boy, a little common boy, to this great sage who's the spiritual master of all these elevated devotees. So that's the potency of Srimad Bhagavatam and the association of devotees. Well, I was about done. I was just gonna, the only other thing is that, this is Bhadra Purnima, and there are verses from the last canto, last chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, and I thought I could just read those. This is after, Parikshit Maharaj has left, and this is the sages Namisharanya and Sutta Goswami saying. This is, usually we don't hear too much from the 12th chapter, because that's later. So from beginning to end, the Srimad Bhagavatam is full of narrations that encourage renunciation of material life, as well as nectarian accounts of Lord Hari's transcendental pastimes, which give ecstasy to the devotees and demigods. This Bhagavatam is the essence of all Vedanta, because its subject matter is the absolute truth, which, while non-different from the spirit soul, is the ultimate reality. The goal of this literature is, anybody have an idea what the goal of the literature is, Srimad Bhagavatam? Pure devotional service unto that supreme truth, yes, which is the method for getting pure love of God. Very good. If on a full moon day of the month of Bhadra, one places Srimad Bhagavatam on a golden throne and gives it as a gift, he or she will attain the supreme transcendental destination. All other Puranas shine forth only as long as the great ocean of nectar, Srimad Bhagavatam, is not heard. Srimad Bhagavatam is declared to be the essence of all Vedanta philosophy, and one who has felt satisfaction from its nectarian mellow will never be attracted to any other literature. Oh, here's a very famous verse. Just as the Ganga is the greatest of all rivers, Lord Achyuta, the supreme among deities, Lord Shambhu is the greatest. What's that? Greatest of all devotees, yeah, Vaishnavas. Srimad Bhagavatam is the greatest of all Puranas. And in the same way as the city of Kashi is unexcelled, Srimad Bhagavatam is superior among Puranas. It is the spotless Purana, Amalam Puranam. It is most dear to Vaishnavas, Vaishnava Priyam, because it describes the pure transcendental knowledge of Paramahamsas. The Bhagavatam reveals the means for becoming free from all material work, together with the process of transcendental knowledge and devotion. Anyone who seriously tries to understand Srimad Bhagavatam and who properly hears and chants it with devotion becomes completely liberated. I meditate upon that pure and spotless absolute truth, who is free from suffering and death, and who in the beginning personally revealed this incomparable torchlit light of knowledge to Brahma. Then Brahma spoke it to the sage Narad, who narrated to Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas. Sri Vyas revealed this Bhagavatam to the great sage Shukadev Goswami, and Shukadev Goswami spoke it to Parikshit Maharaj. We offer our respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vasudeva, the all-pervading witness who mercifully explained this science to Brahma when he anxiously desired salvation. This is Sutta Goswami. I offer my humble obeisances to Srila Shukadev Goswami, the best of mystic sages, and a personal manifestation of the absolute truth. He saved Maharaj Parikshit, who was bitten by the snake of material existence. O Lord of Lords, O Master, please grant us, this means all the sages there at Naimisharanya, please grant us pure devotional service at your lotus feet, Lord, life after life. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Lord Hari. The congregational chanting of his holy names destroys all sinful reaction, and the offering of obeisances unto whom relieves all material suffering. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. I didn't see any questions. There's no questions. Any question? Any question? Comments, questions, corrections? Yeah, oh, question here. Question in the audience. Yeah.
You said that Narad Muni heard that as a child, right?
Yes.
About Srimad Bhagavatam. But then, how is it that he inspired Dasi to write it? I'm trying to do the timeline.
He already heard it. Yeah, but Srimad Bhagavatam was existing already. Yeah, but it had Vyasadev's function was to gather it and compile it and edit it and put it into writing. That was his. So he hadn't done that with the Srimad Bhagavatam. Vyasadeva. It was already existing. Yeah, it was actually, as mentioned in the verses we read, also Krishna revealed it to the heart of Brahma, and Brahma gave it to Narad. But Vyasadev's function was to compile and edit that information for the benefit of the people in Kali Yuga. Yes. Yeah, that's finished. Finished.
The next one is next week. This series is next week.
I don't know.
Okay. Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
It was really good, and I was able to get back to the roots and
Oh, nice.
understand a lot of things, and it was nice listening to you.
Thank you.
Can you give us like an everyday, like a practical spiritual trip, ISKCON practical, like the things that are taught at a Vedanta level, like so deep. Like,
Yes, they are.
You get so lost in your day-to-day
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
So
So-
we are giving a very practical basic thing
Yeah.
that we keep in mind every day.
Yeah, so along with the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended that every person, especially people born in India, regularly chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra for, even if you at least, you can chant it all the time, but at least for half hour, then that will sensitize the heart to be able to understand more and more about that. So the process of spiritual advancement isn't just from study, as you know. It's not just, so nobody just by studying the scriptures can really get an understanding. It comes from hearing, but also doing service. And that service is like chanting. Chanting Hare Krishna is the beginning of our service. So both things go together. And then by doing the service, then when you do study and you do read, then it becomes, you can understand. Krishna says, Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam piti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamudbhyanti. He says that those who rendered regularly devotional service to me, I give them the enlightenment by which they come. So it's by his grace. So especially in this age of Kali, what's especially recommended as one's first practical service is to regularly chant the holy names of God. Hare Krishna. Yes, sir.
You mentioned how the Bhagavad Gita is the ABC.
Yeah.
And Srila Prabhupada, he started off translating Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
For us. At what time did he, what year did he do the Bhagavad Gita?
Well, actually, he first translated and commented on the Bhagavad Gita back in India. And then apparently somebody stole it back then. And then Srimad Bhagavatam. Anyway, he was working on Bhagavad Gita very early also, especially when he first came to the United States. And but the first book that he published in the US was Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. He published Srimad Bhagavatam, 3 volumes in India. And one thing in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, this beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by this great sage Vyas, you know this verse, is sufficient in itself for God realization. So, yeah. Bhagavad Gita is there also, but it's ABC. But so, and in the early days of ISKCON, we only had 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam, nothing else. And Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, this is enough. This is enough." And well, there was the Macmillan purple Bhagavad Gita. So.
3 volumes.
Oh, one other thing is when Srila Prabhupada came, he translated Bhagavad Gita in India and it was stolen. He translated it also in New York, in his room in New York, and it was stolen then too. So there was two things. So. No, before then. Yeah, he published it in 1968, and but it was because it was Macmillan. They had the rights to it, and so he gave them the whole thing. But they cut it down. They took out the Sanskrit, and they took out the word-for-word meanings, and they took out many of the purports. And so it was a little book. It was a small book, maybe 300 pages or something like that, and it was all English, no Sanskrit. So that was the first Bhagavad Gita that was printed in, Vaishnava Bhagavad Gita here. Good point. Yes?
The Bhagavatam that was spoken from Srila Vyasadeva, and then we talked about the other times it was spoken from Shukadeva Goswami, Parikshit Maharaj, and then from
Sutta Goswami.
Sutta Goswami to the sages of Nilambari. Was it the same Bhagavatam, or did it expand? Did the Leelas expand?
It had to expand. Because Shukadeva Goswami, and his disciple was Sutta Goswami. So it wasn't like, but on the other hand, I said that, I can't be 100% sure because part of the Srimad Bhagavatam is that it's Trikaladrik. So for example, in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a description of the kings that will happen in Kali Yuga. And they're all mentioned one after the other, boom, 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 boom. There's the Vedic kings, and then at a certain point, there's another king, I think his name is Nandishwar or something like that, who's become a kind of a rogue. And he said, and from then on, they're all rogues practically. And then there's a mention of Chanakya Pandit there. And so there's, and then the description of Kali Yuga is also there. So it's a good question. I can't say for sure, but it would seem that it's expanded to include Sutta Goswami. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Panchakalpatarubhyascha, kripa sindhubhyeva cha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namaha. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu, Vishnu Gada Prabhu, for such a beautiful lecture. It just reminds us that reading and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam can elevate souls like us, as it did Narad Muni. So that's the importance of Srimad Bhagavatam in our lives. Now, as most of you know about Bhadra Purnima today, so this has been a big event in ISKCON worldwide community. And the purpose of the event has been to distribute Srimad Bhagavatam sets throughout the world. And this is not only in the US, but starting from Australia right up to Hawaii. So covering the covering all the countries, the different centers, as well as the different temples. And as we celebrated His Holiness Bhaktivinoda Thakur's appearance day a couple of days ago, so he was referred to as the seventh Goswami simply because of the number of books he had written. He had written more than 100 books, and the idea of his writing so many books was to preserve the Vedic literature. So also in Bhadra Purnima, the emphasis is on devotees coming together and distributing Srimad Bhagavatam sets to people in their family, friends, co-workers, or even their neighbors. If some of the devotees don't have a Srimad Bhagavatam set, this is a wonderful opportunity to take a Srimad Bhagavatam set in your family. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that he wants Srimad Bhagavatam to be placed in each gentleman's home. So this is a wonderful opportunity to place Srimad Bhagavatam wherever there is an opportunity for us. So today, we still have time for someone on the Zoom call or on YouTube to come forward and pledge a Srimad Bhagavatam set. Bhadra Purnima is today, but you can very well take the Srimad Bhagavatam set and give it to the person who deserves it in the days to come. So, so please let us know. We still have some time. And as we do that, we would also like to acknowledge and glorify those devotees who have really come forward and participated in the Bhadra Purnima campaign. As we said, this is a worldwide movement, and the movement means that someone has to move, and there are many devotees who have come forward and participated in this campaign. The other thing this year has been that the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust is also organizing a Mahayagya at Ahobilam, which is tomorrow Indian time, and 10 o'clock our time, which is a couple of hours away. So this will be broadcast on Facebook at the BBT channel, and also on the Hare Krishna TV on YouTube. So those of you who are interested can tune in at 10 o'clock tonight for the Mahayagya. And now we would like to call out the names of the devotees and people who have participated in the Bhadra campaign in Philadelphia. So these have not been organized in any particular order. So these are just randomized. So, so we will start with Murli Krishna, Shreyansh Chaudhary, His Grace Vishnu Gada Prabhu, His Grace Kavalya Prabhu Vivukshi Mataji, Praveen, Vishamba Gauranga Prabhu, Parinita Gaura Hari, Maruti Nasimha Rao Kuluru, Dronacharya Prabhu, Vamandev Prabhu and Sangeeta Mataji, Sita Mataji, Nananya Prabhu, Bhakta Charles, Anil Prabhu, Jagannath Chandra Prabhu and Priya Rasika Mataji, Suman Mataji, Govan family, including Nanda Dulal Prabhu, Krishna Priya Devi Dasi, Satyan, Gopi, Roshni, Smriti, Meera, and Abhay. Makadia family, including Vijay, Ila, Sneha, Priyanka. Duwat family, including Pratik and Dhira. Narsingh Chatterjee. Then we have Kedarnath Rastogi and Uma Rastogi. Then we have a Rastogi family, including Nija, Anisha, Sudhir, and the second last one is Sham Kumar Prabhu, Pratipriya Mataji, and Urja. And last but not least, Rasik Sham and Jayantanitai. And there is one more name, Anish and Anika. So these are the devotees who have participated in the Bhadra campaign in Philadelphia. Just to give you a perspective, that worldwide, there was a goal of 10,000 Srimad Bhagavatam sets to be distributed by all these ISKCON centers and temples. And as of this morning, the goal has been smashed, and all the temples in ISKCON worldwide have crossed 20,000 Srimad Bhagavatam sets for this Bhadra campaign. So this has been a movement to unite all the temples and centers across the world. So again, we would strongly urge and request you with humble hands that if you still would like to sponsor a Srimad Bhagavatam set or gift a Srimad Bhagavatam set, or even want to take it for yourself, please, you can share your name. You can either text, call, so that at least your name can still be included, and we will try our very best to get your name across to the Yagya, which starts in a couple of hours at Ahobilam, India. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Sure. So each set is $260 for Srimad Bhagavatam, and it is available in multiple languages. So we have English, we have Hindi, Marathi, Bengali, Tamil, Telugu, and Gujarati. So there are many languages to choose from. So and if you are still thinking about it, let us know. Yes, sir.
Hare Krishna. I would like to thank Denu Tarpata Prabhu for being the enthusiastic force behind the distribution of Srimad Bhagavatam here in Philadelphia for this Bhadra Purnima campaign. It's great to hear that worldwide we have met our goal, exceeded our goal. And now that we've distributed these Srimad Bhagavatams, we want to encourage the devotees to now read the Bhagavatam and study the Bhagavatam. So please join us every morning at 7:50 a.m. on the same Zoom channel where we have a Bhagavatam Sangha. And this is a great place to start to learn and hear about Srimad Bhagavatam. I would also like to thank His Grace Vishnu Gada Prabhu for speaking to us tonight on the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. His presence here as one of the primary teachers is a big inspiration to so many of us, and we're very fortunate to have a senior devotee be able to give us insights on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So thank you very much, Vishnu Gada Prabhu. Although this was a campaign for Bhadra Purnima, the book distribution of Srila Prabhupada will continue throughout the year. Please stay tuned for more opportunities for book distribution. Even though we're in COVID period and we can't go out as much, there are still creative ways which we can get involved in spreading this beautiful message of Krishna consciousness to others. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki